Imagine a man fighting for his wife's attention with his new baby, or even imagine your husband fighting for your attention with your new baby, the baby that belongs to him, and he's using that as an excuse to cheat, saying that you neglected him and you're focusing more on the baby. Isn't that crazy?
Scotty here said, "My first is 8 weeks old. I can see why men cheat at this time. My wife completely ignored my existence for the first few weeks, and we had to have arguments to get her to even acknowledge me, not to mention be intimate. That's the biggest challenge. Baby is easy." Oh, Scotty, in the am I the asshole of life? Yes, sir, you are. And in the first few weeks you were arguing about intimacy? The first few weeks? It's at least 6 weeks, my guy. The doctors tell you at least 6 weeks. And of course the baby's easy, because you're over here whining on your ass about not getting enough attention while she's taking care of the baby. The baby she just grew for almost a year and gave birth to, while you cry like a baby. Probably more than the baby, because you don't have enough attention. And you think that's an excuse to cheat? Seriously. And y'all fucking wonder why we don't want to do this with you.
Some men are attention-seeking babies in form of adults. They want to be the center of attention. They want everything to be about them, and they really don't care about others.
Men and women, we have become culturally incompatible, and because that's it, we've just become culturally incompatible. We no longer share the same ideals. We no longer believe in the same things. We no longer want the same goals in life. We no longer believe in each other. We no longer trust each other. We no longer give each other any type of grace. We don't see any good in each other.
The part about this that they're failing to understand is that a lot of us never liked you, never loved you. We tolerated your abuse because we had no other choice. And while many of us might have loved you, I'm sure most of us never trusted you. Because the ink on the 13th Amendment was barely dry before y'all stepped over us in order to access just a sliver of male privilege. The moment you had the chance to dominate us and make us submit, you did. And if you couldn't do that, you abandoned us. But we stuck with you. We stuck with you for a long time. We supported you for so long, no matter what you did to us. But we're not doing that anymore.
Ladies, were we ever culturally compatible with men? It was a one-sided thing. Men were the ones dominating, treating women anyhow. A lot of women had to put up a show. They were just smiling and suffering. The ancestral situation, the cultural situation he's talking about favored men. Men were happy because they were the oppressors, and women had no voice and they had no choice but just to stay put and manage. It has suddenly become a cultural incompatibility because women are now rising up and fighting against the injustice we endured for a very long time.
In some ways, it's like I'm making light of it, but actually, could you find a kind of more telling sign of the fact that so many men are just kind of feeling like, well, maybe a bit useless, not very attractive, not very needed, not liberous? In some ways, the online dating apps are just magnifying that.
When you take out the equation that women need a man for survival, women need men for financial stability, when that's taken off the table, women become far pickier and don't even want the hassle of a romantic relationship, especially the hassle of a marriage. Marriages can be very laborious. But what marriage did for men, and this includes the area of men that we now call incels. We didn't have a problem of incels really, because women had to marry in order to survive. So it didn't matter where you were in the status of, or hierarchy of patriarchy. As a man, you could still always get a wife. But the more that we become financially stable and we are the ones getting an education, more and more we're introducing women in fields that have been monopolized by men. One of the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs. We've also become very picky with who we allow in our lives. And the thing about women is we have very close relationships with family and friends. And those relationships we rely on the way that a man or a husband has relied on his wife for. We've also become very capable of being able to rely on ourselves. And the healing that's been going on in the female or women community has really opened our eyes to the fabrication of romance. As far as its importance in our lives. But the happiest we'll ever be is falling in love with a man. We were settling. We were having to settle. We were having to marry men that we normally would not have been attracted to, would have normally chosen, except for the fact that they would be putting a roof over our head and food on the table, because that just was not an option that we could do on our own. And so yes, there will be more and more non-romantic relationships. There will be more and more men who were entitled to a wife, entitled to a romantic relationship, that will not have that option, because naturally that's how it would have been anyway. And that in and of itself is going to be problematic, because that's a dangerous group of men.
Men are realizing how useless they are to women, and this realization has increased the hate some men have for women. From inception, most men hated women and were only interested in what they could get from women. I understand in the past, women married men mostly for survival, and this whole survivor marriage was created by men because men restricted women's independence in the society. Women did not have access to so many things, and they could not stand on their own, and they could not survive on their own, and all this whole structure was orchestrated by men. And I know some men argue and will still argue and say women only get with men because of what they get from men. It's vice versa, but women have justifiable reason for doing that. Like I said, men created a system that was not favoring women, a system that restricted women, and men were the ones that had the upper hand. Men were the oppressors. So right now, women don't need men anymore for survival because women can fend for themselves. The society has shifted, things have evolved. The current society is more favorable to women regarding women's independence and finances. So women are getting jobs and fending for themselves. So look at it. If women were getting with men because of survival, they needed to eat. So why should women get with men when they have access to go to work and fend for themselves? Taking it back to the past, men had always had the upper hand. They had money, but they still wanted women. They wanted to enslave women, use women to get their chores done and have their babies. What does that tell you about men? They were not subdued, they were not oppressed, but they were the oppressors, and they oppressed women. But for women were fighting for survival, and they've gotten a means to survive, and they're saying they don't want to be with men anymore. They are not oppressing men, but they're saying we don't want this relationship anymore. Men have always viewed women as slaves and treated us accordingly. The society grooms and conditions men to have internalized hatred for women. That man you are with might have hatred for you.
Making content about the issues that women face has really opened my eyes to how much men hate women. I was naive before. I knew that patriarchy existed, sexism existed, but I did not realize how fundamentally, at their core, most men hate women. I'm sorry, girl, this is gonna sound shitty, but if you have a man and he is not actively speaking out about women's rights and women's issues, he probably fucking hates you. I get comments all day long, every day, on anything I post, telling me how terrible I am, how I should die, how my gender, the violent things that should happen to me, the rights that should be revoked from me. I get those comments from children, from little boys as young as 12, 13, 14. I get them from grown-ass men. I get them from 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds. But the most common is from average, everyday dudes, right? I click on their social media profiles and they have wives. They have families. They have children sometimes. Sometimes they're twice my age. Sometimes they look happy. They post photos of their hobbies, the things that they enjoy doing. And then they comment on my profile talking about how a woman who was pureed by her boyfriend deserved it. And they make jokes about it. Or they send me DMs. Telling me the vile things that they want to do to me. I wish I could just dye my hair and open my phone and not read a graphic DM about the ways that a man wishes that I would be assaulted. But I can't even do that. So women, again, if your man is not actively speaking out in support of women, if your man is not actively calling out men, you should ask him if he can take a look through his social media. You should ask him if he can take a look at the comments that he posts. Because most social media apps under the activity section, they have that function where you can see everything you've liked and everything you've commented. What's your man saying to other women online? This is going to be a really, really, really good indication of how he views you. Check it out.
Men murder women in Britain at an astonishing rate. There's a femicide project out there that is documenting every time this happens, but it's hundreds of times a year, and many, many more times than that. And if you look at the data, the number of women if you have a room of people that contains even 5 women, it's ridiculous The number of these women who would have been subjected to some form of street stalking, actual stalking, sexually inappropriate behavior, a sexual assault or other kinds of assault at the hands of men. This action doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from an absolutely rigid objectification of women. Some of these ridiculous, they would call themselves alpha men. I would call themselves the weakest of men, who consider women to be objects and think that if they are denied, that is cause enough for them to inflict harm on women. Yes, the kind of misogyny we're seeing in the world right now, in Britain right now, is absolutely akin to extremism. I would simply say that the approach we need to take to it as a kind of extremism must be more effective than the blunt approaches we've taken to other kinds of extremism, which are also equally ineffective. This is about education, not just about sanction.
Breaking news, after the government of Afghanistan went viral for making it forbidden for women to speak out loud in public places, they've now added a new law stating that women can no longer, quote-unquote, hear each other's voices in public and private. This comes as the Ministry of Virtue and Prevention of Vice decided to ban women from going to high school or university, working in civil service, attending a protest, going abroad, singing, speaking to a male doctor, looking at men they don't know, not wearing anything that's covered head to toe, owning a smartphone, and the list goes on. Join me on Discord to talk about it.
The Taliban have banned women from talking in Afghanistan. Khalid Hanafi, the Taliban's Minister for Virtue, said it's now forbidden for adult women to allow their voices to be heard in public, and they're already banned from reading in public. In addition to this, they must also veil their face and body at all times and only wear loose-fitting clothing to avoid tempting others, and they're forbidden to look at men who they are not related or married to. One activist said, "How are women who are the sole providers for their families supposed to buy bread, seek medical care, or simply exist if even their voices are forbidden?"
The shocking thing is that hatred for women is embedded in our religion. Afghanistan is a Muslim country. They treat women like slaves and like men's property. The Christian Bible is not better. Hatred for women has been displayed in the Bible in different ways.
How is the Bible misogynist? Wait, is that a serious question? How is it not? Did you read it? One of the foundations of the book is that a woman is the reason for all of the suffering of humanity. It's not like that was a one-off story and it's like whatever, nobody cares. No, they bring that up again, like for misogyny. Let a woman learn quietly and with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach nor hold authority over a man. Rather, she is to be quiet. For it was Adam who was created first, and then Eve. And Adam was not deceived. It was Eve who was deceived and became a transgressor. That is the Apostle Paul speaking on behalf of God, talking about who should be allowed to teach the gospel. We got women pastors, but according to the Bible, they shouldn't even be in the conversation. I'm gonna just fire off misogynist verses from the Bible. I could do that shit all day. I could max out this video just doing that. About the time an angry mob showed up to try to grape a couple of angels, and Lot, who was referred to as a righteous man, said, "Hey, don't grape these angels, grape my virgin daughters instead." What about the time Lot's wife got turned into salt? Literal salt. For what? For looking back while running away. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. You know, because women are property, like donkeys. If a man seduces a virgin and she is not betrothed, he must pay the bride price and then take her as his wife. If the father won't give her to him, you know, because she's property, he still has to pay him the bride price. Just whatever the going price for virgins is these days. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. A lot of women die from that one. Like thousands. According to the Bible, women are unclean after childbirth and need to go through a purification ritual to cleanse themselves. If her baby is male, she is unclean for 7 days and has to go through a 33-day purification. However, if the baby is born female, she is unclean for 14 days and has to go through a 66-day purification ritual because female babies are twice as unclean as male babies. I cannot believe you asked me how this book is misogynist. Should we keep going? I can keep going. We're only like 3 chapters in. We're just in Leviticus. Women on their periods, unclean. Anything that they touch is unclean. Anyone who touches anything that they touch is unclean. If a priest's daughter becomes a prostitute, burn her alive. If a man makes a vow, he is expected to keep that vow. Women can't make vows unless their husband or their father allows them to make a vow. Because women were property. Am I stressing this enough? Is it getting through or no? If you're at war and you have some captives as a result of a battle and you find one of them cute, just take her. She's your wife now. You can do that. If a man marries a woman and he suspects that his wife was not a virgin when they got married, he can make that accusation. And if they can't provide proof, like bloody bedsheets or something, to prove that she was a virgin, the punishment is her being stoned to death. If a betrothed virgin is raped in the city and she doesn't scream out loud enough, the punishment is being stoned to death. This is God's book. God's book. I need y'all to hear me right now. If a man rapes an unbetrothed virgin, he must pay the father 50 shekels of silver, and then he has to marry her because she is his property now. If two men are fighting and the wife interrupts them or tries to stop it and she accidentally or on purpose grabs one of the men's junk, cut off her hand. I haven't even talked about concubines. Men could have concubines. Women couldn't do that shit. I haven't talked about the reoccurring themes of women's subservience, submissiveness, none of it. Matter of fact, let's jump into the New Testament. We haven't really gone in on Paul. Paul, one of the apostles, was arguably the first recorded incel. Raging misogynist. Here's some quotes credited to Paul. If a woman refuses to cover her head in church, shave her head. A man is the image and glory of God. A woman is the glory of man. The man wasn't created for the woman was created for the man. Women must submit to their man in everything, as though he were Christ. Teach young women to be obedient to their husbands. These are all verses in the Bible, all of them. You cannot read this book and not call it misogynist. You can't. I'm not saying don't follow the Bible. I'm just saying know what's in it. You should know that the Bible says that on this planet that we are currently on today, there were talking animals, giants, they were called the Nephilim, look them up, and a multi-headed fire-breathing dragon called the Leviathan. It's a massive sea serpent that's referenced several times. You should know what's in the book. Know what's in the book. I know it's a dry read. The authors did not cook with this one. The plot is not plotting, the rising and falling actions all over the place. After the Old Testament, it's just God telling people what to do and then just killing anyone who doesn't listen. The real merciful shit was going down in the Old Testament. But you should know better than I do. You shouldn't be asking me how the book's misogynist. How is it not? Y'all, you're making me hot. Fuck. I will see you in the next video. I'm fucking sweating.
That was a good one. Christians, read your Bible and understand it for yourself. You don't have to wait for your pastor to read it and interpret it to you. Read it and understand it for yourself. I know some Christians in the comment section are getting ready to tear me apart. It hurts. I understand, but I really don't care. Please, you don't have to argue and say, oh, that was the Old Testament. Oh, Jesus came and abolished it, and now we are with the New Testament. We've heard it before. Please, we don't want to hear that in the comment section. The Abrahamic religion are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They share a common belief in Abraham as the first prophet, and they also practice women hatred, misogyny. Patriarchy is misogynistic, and some of the teachings of the Abrahamic religions aligns with the structure of the patriarchy. So who are they deceiving?
Are there any other men in this country that are absolutely on board with burning down the fucking patriarchy? Or am I the only one? Bro, like my algorithm, I've been on this 2, maybe 3 years. I've been on this journey of like unlearning. And I don't know if it's just my algorithm and the videos that I see, but I have digested so much content from women just talking about the patriarchy and male privilege and safety concerns and all these blind spots that men have. And I'm just like, dude, like the level of, I didn't know what patriarchy was 3 years ago. I mean, I knew it was a word, but if you ask me, what's the patriarchy? I'd be like, oh. Like, do you know the level of male privilege it takes to not know what the patriarchy is all about? And it just feels like this subject is something that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I'm at this point right now where I'm like, who's with me? What are we doing? What are guys doing about it? Am I the only one? Is there anybody else seeing this shit? Like, where's the rally? Are we burning the patriarchy? Like, when is it? Do we ride at dawn?
The rise of confident women marks the end of the control and power that terrible men have. If you ever wonder why men hyper-fixate over, obsess over, abuse, sometimes even kill confident women, it's because confident women turn around the social script that these men rely on for their power. And that social script is essentially institutionalized misogyny and male superiority. These men rely on the subjugation of women to feel powerful. They are effectively the clown from It, where they have no real strength and no real power, so they have to rely on the implication of the damages that they can cause in order to feel some sense of control. Then subject women to that in a vacuum of the history of misogyny in America. When women refuse to take it anymore, what it does, whenever they push back, it triggers something in the back of the minds of these guys who rely on that institutionalized misogyny to feel some sense of power, some grandeur, some sense of mental stability. They rely on that because they have no real identity, and the reason it triggers them is because it triggers that false identity that they associate themselves with, that's spoon-fed to them. Anytime you see women talking about what it's like to deal with that institutionalized misogyny and to deal with men that catcall them and men that generally abuse them, and you see in their comment section guys calling them fat, ugly, worthless, meaningless, Just know, one, those guys genuinely are stupid. And I'm not talking about the kind of stupidity where you're just emotionally vulnerable and your mind isn't capable of housing like real thoughts. I mean, their brains are smooth and they are not capable of complexity. I mean, they are genuinely dumb, and you can hear it when they talk. You can hear how their brain is just not capable of processing a whole lot. And right now they're panicking. It might seem like they're fairly rampant and powerful right now, but that's just because they're a dwindling minority, and they're panicking and screaming, lashing out, shouting out, causing all sorts of a fuss, having temper tantrums and meltdowns because of the fact that they don't know how to deal with the changing times. They don't know how to deal with the fact that they are going to die out. Man babies, misogynists, abusers, they're coming to an end. That's one of the main reasons why I love social media so much. It allows people to actually expose the truth. There's all this conflict and controversy about how social media is taking us away from our youth and from our roots. And there is truth to that, but it's also exposing us to a greater social net, which allows us to actually see the truth in things and expose the reality behind obfuscated stories.
The patriarchy system is causing more harm than good. It is destroying the lives of both men and women. It is also destroying our society and the natural order of things. The patriarchy packages and sells numerous lies to women. We were told by the system that men are better at leadership than women. Let's hear from a neurologist.
There are general differences between men and women of these tests. So I published a study on 46,000 scans looking at gender, and we're not the same species. Female brains are wired for leadership. They have much stronger frontal lobe function. And the statistic that goes with this is who goes to jail, right? Whose behavior is so bad they have to put you in a cage? Males. 14 times more than females. But their emotional brain is much busier. And so that explains why they're at a significantly higher risk of depression. Structurally, the limbic system's larger in women because it's partly involved in mood, but also deeply involved in bonding and caretaking. And there's not one society on earth where men are primary caretakers for children. You sort of have to go down to penguins before you get that. Seahorses as well.
So forget being generalized. We're hearing it directly from the neurologist's mouth who did the studies, who've in fact determined that we're almost like we're not the same species. Factoring into why there's so much gender wars between the male and female humans, because we are operating from faulty programming that has been socially constructed rather than us looking to nature for how we're supposed to live. You know, making fun of single mothers because they don't have their matriarchs is what the real issue is, because it doesn't matter whether a man is in our life or not. We can do what we need to do. All we have to take is your sperm. So at the core of these conversations is really men feeling insecure because you guys feel useless. And the more women fight for their freedom and independence and show you just how much we really don't need you, the sadder you all become. Y'all are just in survival mode, fighting for your life to have access to women that so many don't want to give you anymore, because we realize that it's not you who's the god. It's actually us.
Most of the things that we're doing in our relationships with men as women are things that are benefiting men, and then they use it against us. And one of these things are us trying to learn better communication skills, more words to explain ourselves. We get more knowledge on attachment, trauma, and all these things so that we can understand him better and provide more and more space for him. Basically to become his emotional conduit so that he can grow up. We are becoming like surrogate mothers who give him words, space, understanding, depth, all those things. And then they're like, oh, I really love it when we have this conversation. And you're like, oh, it feels so good. And you feel so proud of yourself for getting a grown man to talk about his feelings. But that's it. We've been taught that since we're good at this, we should be teaching men and be more tolerant and be more understanding, because men didn't learn these things and we have to teach them. But my argument is this. If we are supposedly so much more emotionally mature than men, how is it possible that we find it possible to be in a relationship with someone with the emotional intelligence of a toddler, and also as having this project running to raise him so that he can understand us, and that then we can have the relationship that we want with him? What does that say about our own true emotional maturity and what it is that we're really pursuing when we are in relationships with men we see as projects or potentials, or at least emotionally less with less capacity, with less emotional intelligence than us, with less emotional maturity than us? Why are we having relationships with them? Isn't that like having relationships with children? Like, because that's what they are, and we try to tell them all the nice words, make them feel good about themselves. Don't be so demanding, and give him praise for the little things that he does, and condition him like a little puppy when you're trying to have a partner. But that's the thing. Women are so brainwashed from the day that they can understand what a man means, that they have to secure a man's love And so we enter relationships and it's usually us that want commitment, us that want marriage, and then we'll leave it up to them to decide, do they choose us, do they want us? And we're so fixated for that to happen. And whoever is in our path at the time that it has to happen, because also we expire, right? We have to rush. We're going to make it work. And then we resent them. We resent them because we give them so much. And we trying to convince them that we're the one for them. Are they the ones for us? How is it possible that we adjust our standards based on what's available, instead of being willing to hold on to those standards until if someone matches them, then we can become available to them? But instead we're like, yeah, well, we are teaching them, right? So this is in the service of man, because women think that they have to be married with a man. They took it upon themselves to get men up to speed, up to emotional intelligence speed. But all they're doing with everything we're teaching them is use it and evolve into worse versions of themselves. And they become more manipulative. And now you see this new wave of men that is just even worse than the typical abusive, harsh, horrible guy. It's the guys that know it all. They have the emotional capacity and skills. And they use words like space. I need space. And they give you all these things that they learned so that you fall into the trap thinking that they are indeed better than the rest of the men. But they're actually worse, because they're manipulating you in a way that other men are possibly not intelligent enough to do so. And these are your typical nice guys, the guys that talk about things and know things. All these things they know, a woman taught them. A woman trying to communicate with them and get him to understand her and stand by her taught him those things. And no, he didn't learn from his mistakes. He just upgraded his level of emotional manipulative strategies. That's it for today.
I love the fact that modern women know better. I love the fact that we are rising up and putting a stop to this ancestral BS. We are fighting back, doing better, and focusing more on ourselves. We should always put ourselves first. We should make ourselves our number one priority and not a man.
The economic rise of women has achieved what Gloria Steinem set out to achieve, which is to make marriage a choice rather than a necessity. That argument, which was really about changing the economic relation between men and women so that women weren't economically reliant on men, that was the central argument of that wave of the women's movement, and very largely achieved. And I would argue that's probably the greatest economic liberation in human history. Is still playing out. We need to do more in other parts of the world. But one consequence of that is to then put a big question mark next to the role of men. Right, so I think underpinning a lot of these issues that we see kind of playing out for boys and men, it's really there's just a gap.
Yeah.
There's a space with a question mark in it now, which used to be filled with a whole script of ways to be a man, ways to be a dad, ways to be a head of household, etc. And so we've torn up those old scripts by and large in these advanced economies, which is great. But I would say that we've replaced the old script that women had, the one my mum had. So the script my mum had was, you're going to be a wife and a mother, primarily. She was also a nurse, but part-time. So skip forward one generation to my sister, my wife, my female friends. And it was, you're going to be able to stand on your own 2 feet.
If you would love to watch more videos like this, click this video to watch men review why men are selfish and always want to control women. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.